What happened? There we go. Okay. B'tvach, learning as a schus before Shleima Pilan Chaya Basarach, as well as Meir Ben Cyril Perel. We're learning starting the new Mesechta. If you can't find the place, then you're probably in the wrong on the wrong Zoom. Hakoil Sheichtin Ushchitasan Ksheira. All can shecht, and the shchita is kosher. There can be many explanations in the Mishnah about what this hakoil is including. But essentially what it's saying, we'll see in the Gemara, the Lashon hakoil is a Lashon of l'chatchila. L'chatchila, anyone can shecht. And then the second things is chitasun kshera is a Lashon of b'di'evet, that it's kosher b'di'evet. If you do so, it's okay, but you really shouldn't. The Gemara is going to address that dichotomy. What is the contradiction? Then the Mishnah continues with the third statement, chutz micheir shaita b'katan. The exception to this is the cheir shaita b'katan shema yikalku. They cannot shech shema yikalku l'shchitasan. V'kulin sheshachtu v'achem roinas l'shchitasan ksher. And the fourth statement is, however, one of the things that we previously addressed, if they shecht and someone else is watching, shchitasan ksher. So the obvious, the pashtus of the Mishnah seems to be going on what we said about that even though we said that they can't shecht, but if they're achem roina son shchitasan ksher. But the Gemara is going to say if that's the case, what would say b'kulin sheshach? We would just say ve'im achem roina shchitasan ksher. So the Gemara is not going to want to understand it that way. So again, we have essentially four statements in the Mishnah. The first one is Hakol Sheichtin, a Lashon L'Chatchila. Then we have a second statement, Ushchitasun Shera, which is a B'di'evet statement. Then we have a third statement, a Chayr Shaita B'katan, can't shech, because maybe the Mekalkal L'Shchita. And that's really, so in the Pshatim that I've seen so far in the Gemara, that's saying that a Chayr Shaita B'katan can't do a Shchita, because they're going to make a mistake that's going to make the animal non-kosher. And then the last statement is any that chef and others are watching them, the shchita is going to be ksher. Now, I guess I should have given a preamble before we started. The reason why this is called Chullin is because even though we're still in Kachim, we're talking about something that's Chullin. There's shchita that's Kachim and shchita that's Chullin. There's shchita that's part of a carbon. We're talking about a shchita of Chullin, which is a shchita not for kachim. Although obviously the Mesechta will often bring up kachim things, but that's not the direct subject of the Mesechta. It's talking about a shchita to eat your food. So Dr. Gmar, Hakol Sheichtin, the question that we had referenced, Hakol Sheichtin is mashma l'chatchila. The first statement is that anyone could shech. That means l'chatchila. Ushchitasan ksheira b'di'evet. But then it says shchitas ksheira. Ksheira just means if you did it, it's kosher. You wouldn't say shchitasan ksheira if you were able to do so. You could just say akol sheichtin and leave it at that. So shchitasan ksheira is mashma that it's only b'di'evet. So this is really Rav Ashi is the writer of the Gemara. So he's the one who asked this question. He posed this contradiction on the Mishnah. Amalei Rav Acha Brei Rav Ashi. Rav Acha Brei Rav asked Rav Ashi, "B'chol hakoil lechatchilahu." You're asking this as a question that it says "B'kol sheichta," which is mashma lechatchila, and shchitas and ksher is mashma b'di'evet. But it's not really true what you're saying. That whenever it says hakoil, that means lechatchila you could do it. And he brings an example. Elameata hakol mamirin echad anoshim v'echad anoshim. We know that in Tmura it says, right at the beginning, the first Mishnah in Tmura, it says that anyone can do Tmura. Tmura is when you have a behemoth that was dedicated or consecrated as a carbon, and the owner says, I want to switch this animal for a different animal to be the carbon. So he's not successful. It's a foolish thing to do, and he's never allowed when he does it. But the question is, who has the ability to do so? So one restriction is only the owner can do tmura. But the mission over there says, but other than that, it's not limited that only someone who's a man or someone. Basically, it's going to teach you. The Gemara over there, the Gemara goes to what's that color is telling you. It says hakol mamir. But are you saying, if according to what Rav Ashi asked, when it says hakol, that means lechatchila. Are you suggesting that tmura is lechatchila? A person should do tmura? Baksiv lo yachlifen lo yamar. I say toy barai rabba toy. It's the Torah says lo yachlifen. You shouldn't switch. You shouldn't do tmura. You shouldn't do better for worse or worse for better. But in either case, you're over on a lot. So it's certainly not lechatchila to do tmura. When the Mishnah says hakol mamirid, it's not saying lechatchila you should do tmura. So why are you suggesting when it says over here hakol sheikh, then that means that you could do it lechatchila? Like no, that's not a raya from tmura. Because the Mishnah itself says that you're not allowed to do tmura. Hasam could do any time. Don't say that when the Mishnah over there says hakol, that means lechatchila, because the Mishnah itself says loisha adam rishai lahamel l'shem hamim mumar. The Mishnah itself says that you're not allowed to do so. So it's very clear that it's not saying lechatchila. The Sabayim, and he gets malchus. So, but Rav Bar Yaakov is not has not. I'm sorry, Rav the Rava is not giving up so easily. What about a different Mishnah in Erechin? Hakol marichin ben erochin. There's a din if someone says erchi alat, my value should be on me. The Torah says it doesn't really mean value. It means the Torah assigned value. The Torah assigns a different value for different age men and different age women, and depending on their status. So anyone can make such a statement and be mechoyev to bring the mandated. With the mandated value of the erech, and also you could say about any person, I want his erech to be on me, right? You could say, I see Yossi in the street, I want to dedicate his value. Now, it's nothing to do really with Yossi. That's just going to tell us what the Torah, what classification he will be in under the Torah, and that's how much you'll have to give. And there's a separate of Noidrin Benidrin, where you say not his erech, which is the Torah's mandated value, which is not really dependent on the person's actual value, but he makes a neder that I'm going to give my own actual value I'm going to be makdashit. Benidrin, where he says I'm going to bring or he says I'm going to be mechoyev to bring something a kafi someone else's value, whatever that person happens to be worth. So you could do that. You could use that method of saying how much he's given. So that's Zaknamara Hakanami L'Chatchila. Rav Acha bar Abba is asking, is that also L'Chatchila? According to you, Rav Ashi, you say when it says Hakol Sheikh, that means L'Chatchila. So we say Hakol Marichem Ben Arachim is also L'Chatchila. Frakter Vaksev Kisefta Lindor La'yia B'Chachet. It says if a person stops himself from making a neder, then he won't have a chait. It's better to not make a neder than to make the neder and not pay back. The Tanya, and we learned in the Brayso, Rameir says, first of all, we said, it says, if a person won't make a neder, he's going to avoid a chait. But mashma that if he does make a neder, he is being chait. I mean, it's better not to make a neder in the first place, because there's a possibility that you won't be yotzei. We're very careful not to make nedar. And then secondly, from the second pasuk, I'm sorry. In the Brayso says, Rameir says the best thing, better than to not make a neder. He says it's better not to make a neder from making a neder and not paying. But the best thing is not to make a neder in the first place. Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda, he says it's better to make a neder and then pay it back than to not make a neder at all. But however, the Gemara says, that which Rabbi Yehuda says that it's better to make a neder and fulfill your neder than to not make a neder at all is an easily fulfillable neder. When a person says harezu, he says this animal should be a carbon. So as soon as he says it, the animal becomes hokdash, and then something happens to the animal, he can't bring it anymore, but there's no way to back out of it, and there's no way to avoid. He already was menad of it. But if he says harei alai, amin beis, harei alai, look, then even Rabbi Yehuda will be masking. It's better not to make the neder because of the possibility that you won't follow through.
But if he makes an neder to bring this animal and the animal dies, he's off the hook.
Right. So that's why Rabbi Yehuda agrees that over there it's good to make a neder to say this animal, because if it dies, he's off the hook, and he hasn't violated his neder. But if he makes a neder a real lie and then he forgets about it or he doesn't do it, then he will violate his neder. So it's better not to make the neder in the first place. Don't take the risk. But you see, both Rameh and Rabbi Yehuda say don't make a neder where you're taking a risk on yourself. So how can we say by Erechi Alai, which is similar to Harei Alai, where he's taking on himself that he's going to separate, he's going to be menaded, that how can we say that L'chatchila should do so? If Hakol means L'chatchila, then the mission should not say Hakol by Erechem, because we see all the Tanoim agree in that case, you should not make such a neder L'chatchila. Practically Gemara, V'chol Hakol, La L'chatchilahu. So the Gemara, is it true? So he says, okay. So Rav Ashi says you have a point. It's not always l'chatchila, but is it true? B'chol hakol lav l'chatchila. You want to say that hakol is sometimes not l'chatchila, but is it always not l'chatchila? Are you saying that I don't have a good kasha here? Maybe this is l'chatchila, and therefore Rav Ashi will prove that over here it means l'chatchila. He's saying if you were right to, if Rav Ashi has a proof that in this context hakol means l'chatchila. Simple is true that in every case hakol means b'diavad. Then then I would have to reevaluate my right. But he's saying that sometimes hakol is l'chatchila and sometimes b'diavad. And since I have a right that it's l'chatchila, I have a kash. And he's going to prove that sometimes hakol is l'chatchila. El hakol chayom b'sukkah, hakol b'chayom b'tzitzis, hakanami, the lav l'chatchila. The lav l'chatchila, are you going to say when the Torah says hakol, everyone's mechuyev to sit in the sukkah, and everyone's mechuyev to wear tzitzis, meaning it doesn't mean noshim, but it means a wide range of men. It doesn't mean l'chatchila. Certainly l'chatchila, you should sit in the sukkah and you should wear tzitzis. So Rav Acha says, no, Rav Acha Yaakov, of course, that's not a raya. Chayavin loy ka'amina. When it says hakol chayavin, certainly that means that you have to do it, and l'chatchila you have to do it. It's practical Gemara. Elamayata. Hakol somchen. Echad hanoshim. Be'echad hanoshim. Hachanami delav l'chatchila. So would you say when it says hakol somchen that everyone has to do smicha on the behema, on those karbanos that require smicha? And we say both men and women. Are you going to l'chatchila? He doesn't have to do it. The Torah says that you have to do you have to do smicha. So Rav Ashi is saying that he's saying that you see that when it says hakoil, it means you must do it. So Gemara. So why are you asking it as a kasha? So Rav says back to him, Ika hakol l'chatchila, v'ika hakol d'v'yavet. Hakol the hacha mimayda l'chatchila hu b'tikshila, d'm'diyavet hu v'loi tikshila. So Rav finally gets the question. Listen, you've agreed already, because of my rise before, that there are cases where hakol is not l'chatchila. So why are you saying hakol over here means l'chatchila, and then, so you're saying sometimes hakol doesn't mean l'chatchila, but why are you saying that it means b'davka l'chatchila, and sometimes it doesn't mean l'chatchila? Why are you making it? Why are you interpreting it in the way that makes a question? Amalei, so Rav Ashi said, no, I have a reason why I believe over here it means l'chatchila. Anosh chitosum kshera kashila li militanish chitosum kshera the abed b'chlal hakol l'chatchilahu. Because of the context of the Mishnah, it says first hakol sheich, and then it says chitosum kshera. So once it said shchitas and kshera, why did you have to say hakol sheichtin? The Yaved, Tata the Yaved, lovely. What do you have to say? Hakol sheichtin the Yaved, and then shchitas and kshera the Yaved. Just say hakol shchitas and kshera. Why say hakol sheichtin shchitas and kshera? Say two phrases that both mean the same thing. So it must mean that the first phrase is saying lechatchila, and the second phrase is saying b'di'evet. And then the Gemara is going to give a lot of different pirushim about how they're talking about different things. Although it sounds like from the reading the Mishnah, it sounds like they're both talking about the same thing. We'll explain that they're talking about under different circumstances that shchitashin is lechatchila kosher and shchitashin kshera b'di'evet it's only b'di'evet kosher.
So, question regarding smicha, it's implying that men and women do smicha, right?
Yeah, they have to do smicha. L'chatchila, they're required to do so. Doesn't say it. He's saying over there, it doesn't say lashon chayavin, right? Rav Acha bar Yaakov had gotten away. He had tried to say that I see that there are places that hakol is l'chatchila. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, "What about hakol?" So he said. So Rashi said, "What about hakol chayavin? That's certainly l'chatchila." So Rav Ashi said, no, that's because chayav. I'm not talking about that. They said, what about kol chayav? And they're l'chatchila. So Rashi said, but even so, what do I care that you found the case where it means l'chatchila? We also found a case that's b'di'evet. Let's say over here it's talking b'di'evet. So Rav Ashi said back, but it doesn't make sense to say that both the first part and the second part of the Mishnah, both phrases are b'di'evet. Then what's the point of having it double? That's the chesed.
I think I remember we learned sometime before Menachos that women don't do smicha.
I think it doesn't mean that they actually do the smicha. They're mechoyim, they bring the carbon. Their carbon needs smicha.
So they do it, or the Kohen does it on their behalf.
Right, or the Kohen is their shliach. Yeah,
the Kohen is the shliach. Okay,
right. Amar Rabba Bar Ula. So now we're finally getting to the sequence. The Gemara is going to go through one by one different pirushim to explain different possibilities to understand the Mishnah's, all four statements of the Mishnah. Right? First Hakol Sheichtin, B'di'evet, I'm sorry, Kol Sheichtin L'Chatchila, Shchitas Kshera B'di'evet. Then we say, Cheir Sheichtin, V'Kadon does it, it's not kosher. And then we say, if someone's watching, then it's good. Even someone who's tamei, who shechts a carbon for chullin, means he shechts in the shlachtais. Now, this sounds like what's the chiddush of this, right? We're all tamei. We haven't had a paradum in a long time, even though I recently saw the sub-farm in Eretz Yisrael that has a whole bunch of paradumas waiting to go. But we haven't actually done the Mesechtas to be table. So all of our shchitas are done by sheichtim that are tamei, unless they're a kayin that was very careful from the time they were born and they didn't lose a close family member. So what is it telling you? Tam b'chulin ma'ila member. What are you telling me that a tamei b'chulin is kosher? So there's such a concept of someone be makabel on himself. People back in the day, when there used to be truma, they used to be careful. They said, I'm going to always be careful to do, if I'll ever bring, not truma, there was kachim, they'd bring karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash, and then they would go eat it in the Beis HaMikdash. And the rule is, you're not allowed to eat kachim. So they lived their whole lives, everything they ate, they treated as if it was a carbon that they're not going to be matamet. So that was eating. Chullin shenasu al tyrus hakodesh. Al tyrus hakodesh is someone who is makabel on himself that he doesn't want to become tamet. Ukesava. Chullin shenasu al tyrus hakodesh kekadosh dami. The Chacham Geyser. I mean, this is my assumption. I don't know. It's rather for the first time in forever. Someone came over to me in shul because he heard I learned Daf Yomi. He asked me a question. He asked, "What is this Chullin shenasu al tyrus hakodesh? What's the problem with it?" So because a person would kabel on himself Therefore, we enforce it on him that he has to follow it. What kind of thing is that? So I think it's Takanas Chachamim. They were worried if this guy who is acting as if he's being careful of kashim, then is lax in something, then people will think he could be lax on actual kashim. So therefore, they were as a siyog. Once he was makabel on himself, midrabanan, he has to actually follow. So what does it mean when we say that hakol sheichten lechatchila ketzad uoisa? So someone who's tamei and wants to shecht his animal to eat it, but he wants to do it as if it was kachim. Maybe sakin arucha b'shoichet ba. He uses a long knife so that he could shecht it by slicing the two simonim without actually touching the animal. Because if he were to touch the animal, that would make the animal tamei. However, mukdashim lo yishchot shema yiga b'basar. If it was not just Altaris Akadish, it was actual Kachim, and he was Tameh, he can't shecht it, even though you don't need a Kayin, and a Zar could do it. And as we're going to see, even a Tameh can do it. But with Geyser, in this case, that if it was Kachim, he can't do it even with a long knife, because maybe he'll come to touch it. If he shechted it, and he says, Barili shel enagatish kitosek shera. So this is the second part of the
Kachim.
By kachim, yeah. By kachim is the second part when we said chishritos and ksher in the Mishnah. So this is talking about the case of actual kachim. The imshacha, even though the Mishnah makes no mention of any of the details, this is all very speculative, right? We're filling in a lot of material that's not in the Mishnah. But we're saying, first of all, lichatchila, someone who's tamei can shecht chullin, even if he's makabel on himself Altaris HaKodesh, but he uses a long knife, so that's not likely to touch it. But with kachim, he's not allowed lechatchila to shecht kachim even with a long knife. But if he does so and he says, "I was careful that I didn't touch it," then the diavad is kosher. Then the Mishnah continues, right? We're tracking still.
It's funny. We
four
get
parts
that
in the Mishnah.
previously.
What?
We give it in the previous in a different Mesechtas. I'm not sure if it was Menachos or Zvachim. We give it as a teretz when we were out. I think it was the Menachos outside of Beis Hamikdash, right? If we were chutz and befnim, we didn't have the same concern.
Well, there's a different problem. There's a couple of problems, right? They asked the question: if you're talking about kachim, a tamei is not allowed to go into the Beis Hamikdash.
We use this long knife as an answer back then, right? If you were chutz and azara,
it was a different question. It wasn't for the tumah problem. It was the problem of how could he shecht it without himself as a tamei going into the Beis Hamikdash.
So you're saying over there we're not worried about him touching it. It's because your feet, you can vouch that your feet didn't cross the barrier of the azara.
That's only b'diavad. So I don't remember exactly how it works, but I remember what you're talking about. But then we were talking about the problem of being nichnas into the Beis Hamikdash, which is one of the karbanos b'yair that if you go into the Mikdash tamei. Now we're talking about being metame the basar by touching it.
I wonder if that's the difference, because we can't say that you're not going to cut the animal. Say you're not going to touch the basar of the animal is much harder to say than if your feet are standing somewhere. You say, "I'm not going to move from this place."
Yeah, but the problem is I don't remember the details over there. But how was this? Why weren't we worried about this problem? Why are we saying lechatchila he should cut it with a long knife? Why do we have this problem that he's going to make them touch the carbon? So maybe in that case, I don't remember. Maybe because he's not allowed to go in, so we're not so worried he's going to touch it. I don't remember the details.
Yeah.
It's the second side of this question. How do you ever have this case of someone shechting kachim? It has to be done in the Beis Hamikdash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right? There's all the different spots where the shchitas, some things shchitas are b'tzafon, but it's in the Beis Hamikdash. Yeah. I think I don't remember. It's probably in the Taisa somewhere in the Rishonim. Yeah, Zakti Gemara. So that's the first two parts. And the next part is Chutz mi cheir shaita v'katan. Our Mishnah continued and said, except for cheir shaita v'katan, the afilu v'chulin gredi, the evet namilo. Then we're going back to before this whole discussion, right? We said chulin shenasol taris hakodesh. Then we said it's talking about kosher. Now we're going back, not even chulin shenasol taris hakodesh, stam chulin, by a person who was not nasol taris hakodesh. A cheir shaita v'katan cannot shaft because Shama Yishu, Shama Yidrusu v'Shama Yachlidu. There's a number of psulin in a person who shets. And I'm sure we'll come across them many times in the course of learning Chullin. But these three, Yishu is that a person can't stop in the middle of a shechita. And Shema Yidrusu, he's not allowed to, he has to cut with a slicing motion, a back and forth motion, or a one-step cut, but he can't push. It can't be a chopping motion. And with Shema Yachlidu, he can't do a puncturing motion where he sticks the knife in between the simanim and then pulls it and breaks one of the simanim. Those are all, we're worried that a katan will do that. Then the Mishnah continues, what about the last thing we say, but if it was observed, then it's kosher? Ahai, what is that going on? Now, the Pasha should say, it's saying, even though we just said that a cheir shaita v'katan can't do chulin greda, but maybe if he's being watched, then the person could see that he didn't do one of the invalid types of shchitas. The Mishnah was just talking about it. Why would it say the lashon is very awkward if we're talking about the cotton himself, the cheir shaita v'katan? Because the Mishnah had said, right? It should say the kon shami yoklu eshkitasan, what does it say? That's if we're just a continuation. What's the v'kul sheshaktu? We were just talking about that before. Elo atome b'chulin. Elamai, so it's going back on the first case of a tome who's being chulin al taris hakodesh, that we said that he could do it lechatchila as long as he uses a long knife and he testifies that he didn't touch it. We said he could do it even lechatchila.
Well, you don't have to testify if it's chulin.
What? I'm sorry? You don't have to testify, right, that you didn't touch it. You just have to be careful not to touch it. Right. The Ella Atome, the Mikdashin, Elamai, we're talking about Tome, the Mikdashin. So why does he have to, like we said, when we explained what the Mishnah was talking about, we said that if we're talking about actual kachim, and he's using the long knife, and he's Tame, we don't require that someone watches him. Or we said before in our explanation that all he has to do, when you ask him, he says that I didn't touch it. So why does it say what the Mishnah say if someone was Aymed al Gaba? You don't need Aymed al Gaba, he just has to say. So Gemara Delesa come under the Shiloh. We're talking about a case, the Mishnah is talking about a case, if the person's not around to ask him, then you have to ask someone who saw it and saw that he was careful not to touch it. And then the kachim, the carbon is still kosher. It's not clear to me. I still don't understand this. I've been looking at this. I looked at this a couple of times. Why the Gemara earlier assumed that it has to be talking about where the person said, I didn't touch, that's enough. Why was that mucha? I guess it means because we're trying to say a din was if you use this a long knife, under what circumstance? We're saying but the evidence it's good. So we're saying we're limiting it. The Mishnah limited it in order that this could be a second din. First, we're saying a din that it's good by kachim b'diavad if he says that he didn't touch it, and now we're saying a second din that even if he's not there, then you have to have someone else b'diavad to make it good. That must be what the explanation is. The Gemara really sort of split up the explanation into two parts and then asked it as a kasha. But this is always the end result that we were looking for. That's the two chedushim. First of all, if he's there, he could say, I didn't do it and it'll be the evidence good. And secondly, if he didn't, then someone washed. This din that if it's kosher, that it's kosher. Do we have to look? Why does our Mishnah have to tell? We already saw it. Shechita of kosher is kosher by zarim and noshim and avodim and tmeirim. Where was this? By the way, Menachem, I think it was in Zvachim, not in Menachos. So I think this is where we had this before. Zvachim Lamed Aleph. So it was a good at least 6-7 months ago. You know what happens? You're getting older, and now your long-term memory is better than your short-term memory. Yeah. So in any case, the Mishnah over there says that Shchitas Kodshim is kosher by Tmeim. Bafilu b'kodshei kosher, but actually you Tmeim noigim b'basar, as long as they're careful, not touch the basar, like we said. So why does our Mishnah have to say that same din again? The second part of our Mishnah is telling us, and actually the fourth part, the second part of the Mishnah is telling us this din. So this is the real source for it. And over there, once we're saying a bunch of other things that are possible, that psul and that are kosher to do shechita, we all threw in tamei, even though it was already said. You could say the other way around. Hasam ikar. Over there is the main place that it would say the bekashim kap. But over here, since we said tamei b'chulin, we also said tamei b'mikdash. Now we're just going to go on a small digression, because I want to finish this pshat then before we start the next pshat. Zak Gemara. Hay tamei de itme b'mai. What kind of tumah are we talking about over here? That was saying that someone who's tamei can't touch the kosher, and he can't touch altaris hakodesh techul. Ilay de itme b'meis. If he's tamei tumas meis, b'chal cherev arachman. The Torah says anyone who comes tamei b'chal cherev. Talking about someone who comes tamei tumas meis. Chal cherev means with the a corpse of a knife, but we darshan cherev harei kechol, that the cherev, the sword that was used to kill someone, when it touches the mace, it gets the same status. There's two dinim that are different about this, that it's going to get the same status as the knife, it's going to get a din of the avi avois hatuma, right? A tumas mace has two things that are special about it. First of all, that there's a din of avi avois hatuma. A sheretz is an avatuma. A dead sheretz, it's metam something. It's metam as a avatum. A mace, a human mace, is treated as avi avois hatuma, and the person who touches become an avatuma. So they're equivalent to the sheretz. So we say, and not only that, but the cherev that touches the tumah, the mace, gets the same din as the mace. It becomes avi avois hatuma, and a person who touches a mace that touched a mace, a person that touched a mace becomes an avatuma, and the knife that he touches gets the same din as him. So the din, again. So to make this clear, just because it's a good thing to know, the tumas mace has two nafkaminas. First of all, there's such a thing as an avi avois hatuma by a mace, that the mace itself is avi avois hatuma. And secondly, there's a din that a metal kli that touches something that becomes tamei of tumas mace gets the same din as the thing that touched it. So if it touches the mace, it gets the din of avi avois hatuma. And if it touches the avatuma, someone who touched the mace, it gets a din of itself being an avatum. So if that's the case, so it's in that case, this knife that the tamei person picked, the long knife that he's using to chef the animal, it becomes an avatuma. The tamayel lasakin, if it's an avatuma, it has the ability to be metama the meat itself. So it doesn't help that he didn't touch the meat. The tamei didn't touch the meat, but the knife had the same din as him, and it touched the meat. So it's metame. So Zok to Gemara, Ella de itmi b'sheretz. We're talking about We didn't become tummy tumas mace, but it was tumas sheretz. A sheretz that touches something, a person who touches a sheretz, it becomes the sheretz itself is an avatuma, and the person becomes a rishon, and a rishon cannot be metama a knife. So that's it. You could talk about where he was metama with the tumas mace. We're talking about where he didn't use a metal knife. He used a knife made out of some other material that's not makabel tumah. The Tanya, bakol shoyfim, you can check with anything. Bein b'tzur, whether with a stone, bein b'schuz, with glass, bein b'kruma shakana, with a piece of reed. If you sharpen it, that it can cut the simonim, even though it's not makabel tumah, so it can even be done by. But you still have to be careful that the tumah doesn't touch the actual carbon or the animal. Okay. We'll stop over here before we see the second shot in this mission. Shkayach, such a nice pleasure to learn the new Mesechta. I'll see you all tomorrow morning, Bez Hashem.
Thank you. Have a good night. Good luck.
Good luck.
How do I shut this off?